good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for Honolulu Magazine Life Interrupted, Navigating What's Next. We're happy to have all of you joining us on Zoom, on Facebook. We're happy to have our panelists here. Today, we'll be talking about caring for parents and grandparents and some of the intergenerational things we are grappling with in the pandemic and at different times. So we kind of want to talk a little bit all of those things. So I'm going to kick it off by asking all of our panelists to talk a little bit, and then I'll introduce everybody. So let me start with you folks all assist our community across generations and have been family caregivers. Please describe a challenge that you faced. And I'm going to start with Mestiza.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on today. I think when I kind of reflect back on the last 16 months, one of the really big challenges that I have been working on is that professionally, I work in the public health field and work with mental health, but also personally have had my own challenges, including being with my father every day during his hospice care and through his passing. I think that with us having to switch and adapt to how we're able to get support from our family, but also how we're having to grieve at this time, that it has been difficult and that it is so important to kind of reach out to share these stories and to kind of normalize those experiences that have been different than we expected.
Thank you. Bonsil, is there a challenge that you'd like to share, either from your practice or your personal life?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. In this pandemic time, my grandmother actually caught COVID and actually passed away. And during that time frame, she was in California. She caught it in her care home. And during that time, my cousins and I all had to sort of rally around and help support her. My grandmother didn't speak English. And so my generation, being the generation that's Americanized, spoke English, and we talked with the doctors every day and had Zooms with her to speak with her. I don't know if she knew we were there. She definitely heard our voices, but kind of reorganizing how we were all going to be present and kind of step up into the leadership role in our family was kind of a big shift for us. My parents are in their 80s. All of my aunts and uncles are in their 80s, but my cousins, who are all in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, we stood up and we became the next generation to lead. And so that was a really big challenge, and we've been able to kind of manage and kind of step into our role. So that's been a big challenge that I'm grateful for.
How about you, Pookie? Can you share a challenge from this past time?
Sure. Aloha kako, everyone. Mahalo for this opportunity to be with all of you. Like many of us on the panel, I'm a professional caregiver. I'm a clinician and a director at a nursing home, but also a family caregiver for my father in the end stages. So I think there have been many challenges throughout this pandemic and even before. And one of them I think really stands out is the understanding and awareness of situations, as well as the ability to educate and to bring that awareness. In this last year or more with this pandemic, we've really been faced with a lot of problems in pivoting and changing. And I think one of the challenges faced was bringing the needed voices to the conversation to be part of the solutions, navigating the needs of all generations that are involved in family caregiving. What does that mean? What do they need? Where are the similarities? Where are the differences? And really, where are the resources, and how can we bring stakeholders together? A lot of organizations are doing great things and overlapping, but how can we bring it together to close the gaps? And really stepping in and looking at financial resources and just understanding that there's this unexpected role of caregivers that they were not prepared for, and the journey changes over time. So how can we come together and be successful together?
Thank you. I'm going to skip to Keli'i, who can talk about AARP as an organization that's helping folks, and to talk about whatever challenge you'd like to start with today.
Well, I think one of the challenges early on I'm lucky enough to have family members, in addition to myself, who care for our 80 plus year old mother, who's wheelchair bound, and suffering from dementia due to a stroke. And the truth is, one of the concerns was really some of the lackadaisical attitudes people had around COVID and getting vaccinated. So someone in the family decided to travel, got COVID, and couldn't help care for my mom anymore. The other thing we were all worried about was anyone who, had to come and go from the home was making sure that they took precautions to ensure mom didn't get COVID. So to me, that was a challenge, but that also related to the work that ARP's been involved in, which is working to try to get kupuna and folks who care for kupuna to get them vaccinated. So those are some of the issues, but I think just generally I know you haven't asked about the upside, but the one thing about being able to work from home and not have to go into the office is it's been a whole lot easier for my sister and I to be able to be available to care for mom.
For sure. I don't think any of us are going to be pining for the lack of a commute and as we move forward into more opening. Kumi, could you talk a little bit about a challenge? I know at NAMI Hawaii, you folks are always available there to help all of us find resources.
So thank you for having me. The pandemic has been a challenge for my own personal life, my family, as well as the community at large. Being at NAMI, we had such a big increase in requests for help and services. Many people saying, how do I help my aging parents or grandparents or even the youth? A lot of kids were struggling as well as moms just like me. And I think for my own personal life, I live in recovery from depression, anxiety, and I was doing so well. But when the pandemic hit, I had to take care of my two aging parents, and because of COVID and all of that, it disrupted my mother's routine. She's paralyzed and needs a lot of care. So we were getting up at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m., all of these, it was extremely challenging physically, still raising my teenager and figuring his homeschooling situation. My workload has doubled, tripled, and I'm struggling. So it was a big challenge for me personally, as well as my family, as for my aging parents. And my heart goes out to so many others who are struggling during the pandemic. And that's what NAMI's here for, is to give them support and education.
That's great. Well, thank you all for getting right into it. I feel like when we jump right in, it gives people a chance to know why they want to stay and listen in for the rest of the hour. So I wanted to thank all of you for joining us. And as I said, it's Life Interrupted. And I wanted to tell people that they can find your entire bios on our website. But I want to start off in not so cleverly alphabetical order to welcome Poki'i Balaz, Director of Nursing at Lunalilo Home and a clinician at Kokua Kalihi Valley. And I'd like to welcome back Misty Zagas, Program Director for Mental Health America of Hawaii. Thank you both for joining us. I'd also like to welcome for the first time Keali'i Lopez, AARP Hawaii State Director. Thank you so much. I've interviewed you on our other lives, so it's great to have you here. And Comey Mcdonald, Executive Director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness Hawaii. Thank you, Comey. You've just been so great this whole pandemic, helping us through all of this and helping guide Life Interrupted. So thank you so much. And lastly, Vancil Yara, counselor, marriage and family therapist, who practices at the Kahala Clinic for Children and Family. Thank you so much for coming on board this time. It's great to have your perspective. And I'm Robbie Dingman. I'm the editor at large at Honolulu Magazine, and I have the pleasure of moderating today. I'd like to say thank you to our sponsors who have made all of this possible. Our presenting sponsors are the Kahala Clinic for Children and Family and Brain Health Hawaii. Our silver sponsor is HAIS, the Hawaii Association of Independent Schools, and our community sponsors, well represented all through it and today by NAMI Hawaii and mentalhealthhawaii.org. So, and those are the websites that you can see on the screen, and we'll pop those up again later. So I wanted to, again, thank you all for joining us, and let's jump into the next question. Many of us are part of that sandwich generation, caring for younger and older family members. Juggling can feel overwhelming. What can caregivers do? You're all caregivers, so one of you needs to go first.
I'll jump in. I'm never shy. I think one of the things that's real important, I think, for anyone who has to care for a loved one is recognizing or understanding that you're not alone. There's so many people out there. I wish I had the statistics about the really the thousands, if not millions of dollars that are saved by government because family caregivers are the ones providing the health care. And so I think knowing that's out there and recognizing that we all need help at some point, and that we're not super people. You know, we've got our own lives and we have to figure out how to make it all work. And I think a big part of that, which I think you'll hear from the other panelists, is the importance of taking care of yourself. So you have the energy to be the kind, gentle person that you want to be when you're caring for someone. I think that's a really important issue. And just wanted to let folks know throughout, I'm going to be putting some resources in the chat that AARP provides, but I'm sure there's numerous ones out there, and you've got to take time to find help and get help and take advantage of it.
Thanks. Vancille, I know you had a good thought about, and I've used this one too, about when you think about self-care, if you start to feel like it sounds like something you should put second or last, you got to put it first.
Absolutely.
Explain a little bit that.
Yeah. I mean, in this day and age, especially with the last 15 months, how can we be most helpful to the people that are in our families and in our communities and the people we work with if we're not ourselves healthy, right? And so taking care of ourselves, self-care is not a selfish act. It's actually an act of hope and power, and we have to continue to prioritize our own health and well-being, right? I know it doesn't always sit well, maybe in different cultural communities and maybe based on gender roles, but we are the backbone. And if we break, the system isn't going to work. So taking care of ourselves is first and foremost.
Comey?
Hi. So, I am in that sandwich generation, taking care of my aging parents, still raising my own family. And I was experiencing caregiver burnout. And we teach it in our classes and things, and yet I didn't recognize it. And I'm like, why do I wake up every morning crying? And why am I struggling? Why is my memory so fuzzy? Why am I so tired? And I started Googling it. I'm like, oh, duh, it's caregiver burnout. And I was burning out. So I believe that during this pandemic, I did take a month off from caregiving. And I had to ask in humility and talk to my family members and make sure that everyone had my shifts covered. But the other good thing that came out of it was that I enlisted the help of my daughter and my son and my other teenager, as well as my nephews and nieces, and give them a part-time job. So we're giving them a little bit of income, come and do grandma's shift, come and help her with her meals, da 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 da. And it really helped pull our family together. So there was a blessing in that, but it was a challenging season. And I say, give yourself permission to ask for help and take time off if you need it. It's okay, because if I'm crying every morning, there's something wrong, and I'm much better now. But yeah, ask for help. It's good to talk to your family and be humble.
And when you did ask, I think it helps people to know, how did that go? Were they surprised? Were they, how did that conversation go?
So it was late at night and I was just Googling and all the symptoms came out. So I just copied and pasted in a group text to my siblings. And I said, do any of you have these symptoms? Because I thought all of us were experiencing all of this caregiver fatigue symptoms. And I said, I got a 9 out of 10. And they said, I've got 1 or a 2. And I said, oh my goodness, all my siblings only felt 1 or 2. And I was feeling an 8 or a 9. So that was a big wake up call. And my sisters said, Kumi, you need some time off. And they gave me a month off.
That's great. And so they, as soon as they recognized it right away and they were ready to help.
Yes.
That's great. Ms. Disa, could you talk a little bit about the self-care part of things? And I think as we've talked through the pandemic, we've talked about how things changed from we're not going to necessarily bake sourdough and learn Italian and get our origami skills in order. There's sometimes now it's, even though things are easing up, some parts got more difficult.
Absolutely. I think, looking 16 months ago, we all thought we were going to have extra time to learn all these things. And then we just started to realize that emotional exhaustion was just normal from the day to day. And I think we got really excited and said, everything's going to open up. We're going to get back to like a routine and we're going to feel good about that. And then they're experiencing things like languishing or reentry anxiety. And again, are feeling really confused and overwhelmed by that. Languishing just meaning that, things feel monotonous. They don't feel motivating. You're struggling to kind of get active and energized during the day. And when you do put that little bit of energy forth, you just don't get the same return. And it's important to have that conversation and normalize it and say, we're all kind of experiencing that. Some of us day to day and some of us every once in a while. And that when we do try to re-enter into some of these activities, what we thought would be rewarding or very positive can actually be anxiety inducing. You might think, I'm ready for that. I'm going to go do that. And then you're like, you're too close. I'm not sure if I'm okay with this. You're not wearing your mask. I know you don't have to, but I don't know if I'm okay with that. And so self-care is about being okay with what you need, what your risk tolerance level is, and then to just educate people around you. And so I hear everyone giving fantastic ideas for caregiver self-care, but my emphasis would be to say the caregiving can't just be the caregiver's burden. What can the community do to support everyone? And that's where mental health literacy, learning about the different groups and the different needs of our community is so important. And if you're privileged enough to have the time, the energy, and the motivation to learn, please start educating yourself about those things now. And so just coming in today and listening to some of the things being talked about is a great step moving towards that.
Thank you. Puki, can you talk a little bit about the caring for the caregiver aspects?
Sure. And I can reiterate what Comey was saying about the burnout. Before that, I do have some stats to go with what Kaylee said, but
Okay,
this is for the caregivers who are taking care of like dementia, Alzheimer's. So that alone, 51,000 in Hawaii, giving 81 million hours of unpaid care valued at $1.6 billion. So that's kind of just a heads up on all the free work that caregivers are giving. But to wrap back to the question, like Kumi, I'm in that sandwich generation. I'm taking care of my elder parents. And then I have my nephew who is autistic also with me. And I think a lot of this for me really always comes back to this understanding and awareness of ourselves and what we need, as well as being able to let other people know what we need, which sometimes as caregivers, we don't do so well to let others know what we need. Also to acknowledge that culture comes into play. We're talking about the sandwich generation, caring for the younger and the older families. It really depends. Like in my culture, right, it is a privilege and an honor to care for my father, as well as a privilege I feel to be a clinician, a professional and family caregiver. But it's almost of an expectation. I wouldn't, or Kuleana, at least we interpret it as that we are going to care for somebody or honor their wishes to age in place. But that caregivers like me in the sandwich generation, young professionals coming out, we are having a hard time building our career and having to caregive full time while you're expected to build your name, your career, and whatever your profession, having to leave the profession, come back, having to take on more than one job or not take a promotion. And employers are trying their best to be very helpful at this point. But I think I learned through trials that I had to be very upfront with my employers about what I needed, what I could do, where my limitations are, but what I also brought to the table and asking for that flexibility. So like on one job I had at KKV, when COVID hit, we turned around fast. How do we get our health services out to the community? And telehealth hit, that was great for me. But at Luna Lino Home as a director, I had to come to work and provide care. While all programs and services were stopping across the state and I didn't have the services from my father anymore. Or my staff who needed to come to work, but their kids weren't going to school anymore. So there were a lot of problems that we were facing as caregivers, and in the sandwich generation, for me, trying to figure out, how do I be in 5 places at the same time? And how do I do it and still do what I need to do? So a lot of the resources and financial. So for us, when we're feeling we're struggling and we're feeling like the road is coming down on us, it's really understanding, what do I need and where do I go to get that help, or who can I talk to point me in that direction? Because when you can find the answers, or the people who know or have the answers, it starts to take that stress off. And then what I do for self-care, I'll just share it. I grew up my entire life diving. I cannot go to the beach anymore because I have to care for my father. And so I bought an inflatable pool, and I put that on my lanai, and I fill it up with water, and I sit in there and stare up at the sky and just imagine myself out at North Shore. So sometimes, you gotta think outside the box and bring it to you, what you need.
Robbie, this is Kaylee. Can I add something? Because Poki brought up a very good point, which is around, oftentimes it's hard to see caregiving as a privilege, but I agree. The time I get to spend with my mother is just such a treasure. But the issue of sharing that privilege, you ought not feel bad. And I think, just as Ms. Disa talked about mental health literacy, there's caregiving literacy. So my children help take care of their grandma. My grandson helps take care of his great grandmother. He's one of the few people she'll actually listen to, and he's 11 years old. And so, I think some folks might say, gosh, why would you want to burden a child with that? And it's not. It's giving them that time to treasure. And yes, he might, begrudge it at times, but he's learning skills that are going to be important when he has his own children. Well, actually, I want him to be really good so he can take care of me when, when I get older. But I just wanted to combine those things of mental health literacy, caregiving literacy, the privilege, and sometimes we try to save people from certain types of responsibilities and such, and we're really limiting their opportunity for growth when we look at it that way. But I'm just seeing that as part of the discussion now. I'm not sure I thought about it in that way before.
Yeah, I think that's so true.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Kaylee, that thank you for saying that. Just like I think everyone has said, like we didn't come into this alone. We're not alone. We have a village of support, and there's so many people that untapped resources that we think maybe can't do or can, but it's really like having the courage to ask for help and having these really kind of humble moments where we're like, I can't do everything, and I need some support. And stating like, hey, there's a boundary, like I only have this much left in my tank, and I have all these people around me that can help. It's a village of people that have raised me, and there's a village of people that can help lead our kapuna down their road as well. So just wanted to add that.
I'm so sorry to jump in one more time, Robbie. I just wanted to say, I think understanding resources are great, because I just want to point out that not everybody has family that can help them or friends that can help them. I do have like one patient where she is it for her husband. Her children are gone, and she doesn't know anybody on the island. She didn't grow up here. So she feels very isolated, alone. So we also have to acknowledge all the different journeys and types of family and circumstances that we're all facing as caregivers. It's sounds like we're all the same, but it's not. It's very unique stories. We have to take it one at a time.
For sure, that's definitely something that we need to be aware of. I know I'm fortunate to have family and friends, but definitely there's times when your family can step up in ways that maybe your family is not able to do because they're dealing with some other things, and it goes around like that. One of the things I appreciate you folks all sharing some of these things, because I know that we've already heard from people in the community We do invite anyone to start thinking of their own questions and put them into the Q&A, and we'll get to those later on. But one of the questions we've already heard from is, I have dear friends, and one of them is caring for her husband, and he is dealing with dementia, and she kind of doesn't really want to ask for help, or she feels like she always was able to help. What what can you folks offer to, how do you get those tips or their strategies so people can ask for help for themselves and you can get them help when they might not want it? Kumi, did you want to start with that? I think you had a great example.
Yeah, so we deal with mental health issues, and a lot of times the family members will call us and say, my mom is struggling with depression. My senior dad is struggling with anxiety during the pandemic, but he won't get help. What do I do? And so on our resource page, you can get a download of a couple of resources, but this one's a really good one. It's called I Am Not Sick, I Don't Need Help. And you can get a free download on our website, just a few chapters on the communication. But basically, it's teaching lay people how to communicate with someone who doesn't want help. And it's basically the same strategy that all these therapists, all of you folks probably know, but it's really to listen, empathize, agree, and partner. So basically, oftentimes I'll give you an example of my mother who was struggling with anxiety during the pandemic. She didn't want to get counseling. She doesn't want to acknowledge that she has anxiety. But a couple of strategies is listen, listen, listen. Empathize. Mom, wow, this must be tough. Wow, getting up every 2 hours must be tough, because basically it was her anxiety that was causing her not to be able to sleep. Not being able to have hope for the future, like not being able to strategize for some purpose and meaning in her life. So, I listened for all of these things that she felt she was struggling with. Then agree, listen, empathize, agree. So we said, Mom, I noticed you have a hard time thinking about hope for the future. What if we saw a therapist to talk about that? So she was open to that, but she wasn't open to seeing a therapist on anxiety, but she was open to talking about planning for the future. And then about anxiety, she was getting up every 2 hours to use the restroom. Well, we talked to her primary care physician and said, Mom, what about taking something to help you to sleep better? Basically was an anti-anxiety medicine, right? So there are ways to get help for people, but you got to listen, empathize, agree, and then partner. So find that common ground and see if you can find a way to help your loved one who doesn't really want help.
And that spells out LEAP. So that's a way to remember that. Can you tell us one more time?
LEAP, listen, empathize, agree, partner. It's from Dr. Amador, and you can find YouTube TED Talks and all kinds of information about him.
Thank you. Miss Disa, would you like to add a little bit about this?
Absolutely. I think, we've touched upon this just a little bit. There are individual differences, and just educating yourself on maybe the needs of specific generations, the struggles that adolescents are happening, such as transitioning into adulthood and missing some very significant rituals and peer interaction, can be different than maybe some of our Kapuna are having, where one of the big things they're talking about is just this aspect of loneliness and isolation that was pre-existing the pandemic, but has really been highlighted now. And so it's crucial conversations being had. But once we combine kind of the individual and cultural pieces, I think it just boils down to sharing your own story, helping just decrease that stigma around that, like, you might not be okay, understanding there could be different approaches. It's easy for me to say, yes, go talk to someone, like talk to a professional, because that's where I'm coming from. But I also want to really highlight, go to your faith community, go to your elders, go talk to other people within your community that you already have a connection to. And then you don't have to go to those places that maybe you're still too uncomfortable going to, but maybe take an online course, go to a training, a webinar such as this and just start to learn a little bit and stay within that comfort zone, because you also have things like reentry anxiety. There are ways to start to plant those seeds and water them. And so that when they're ready, they'll feel comfortable talking to you about it, and just model it for them and say, you know what, today I wasn't okay, but this is what I did. And then as you continue to share, I think they will get more comfortable in being able to talk about it themselves.
It does seem like we've all spent a lot more time talking about our mental health. And while it shows that's been top of our minds, it also shows that we are at least talking about it. So that's definitely been a help for all of us to feel it. And we do need to remember, I think, especially culturally in the islands, and also as women, we do tend to think it's our job to take care of everything. So I would like invite any of you to also help with other tips and things that have helped you to, and people you've cared for, to be able to understand the, like on the plane, you got to put your own mask on before you can help others. Poki, you had a good example about that, about having the list of things that you might, can you tell us about that?
Sure. So one of the tricks or tips that we have our dementia Alzheimer's caregivers do is that we ask them to actually make a list. And this is actually comes from the Savvy Caregiver program that I teach in the community. So for people who are caregivers for Alzheimer's dementia, things like that, Savvy, Dealing with Dementia, the Alzheimer's Association. And so we ask caregivers to do it. And I do this with my patients, families, residences. They create a list in block times of 30 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, an entire weekend of things they may need, and if they had that much time to them. Also, we just have them make a list of things that they need help with. And the reason why we do this is because as caregivers, our time is so limited. And so a lot of times when people say, hey, can I help you? And then you just kind of like pause and stare at them and you're like, no, or you don't know what to say. So we ask them to carry the list with them so that if someone says that to you or they need help, they can just pull out that list and say like, yes, can you drop off dinner every Wednesday at 6 p.m.? Or could you come for 2 hours on Friday from 2 to 4 and, watch or help me do something so I can go shopping or I can run to the doctors and things like that. And I've done it myself, and I've had my family and a lot of patients. And so it really does help and work. And so that's just one of the tips and tricks we use that's really, really been helpful throughout the program and the feedback we've gotten. But I also just wanted to emphasize too that when we're talking to seniors who, we're trying to get them to accept help, it's really kind of what Comey is going off of, understanding the why. Like, have they accepted the situation or what is happening yet? Are we looking at role reversals where now the children are acting like the parents? Are they losing their independence? Are they losing their freedom? And then like an example of my mom is, she didn't want to ask for help because to her that meant that she wasn't taking care of him. And she's the wife. And if she took care of him or I took care of him, that meant she was doing her job. Or the nights where she's so tired and I try to tell her, I'll feed dad for you, but she refuses because if she doesn't feed him, then she doesn't feel that she's taking care of him and loving him like the wife she's supposed, like that's how she shows that she's going to. So I think a lot of times when senior or elders or kapuna are resistant, I always try to dig in to understand the why. Because if I understand that, then I can help them get to where they need to go.
So what do you do in that circumstance? Do you tell your mom, well, we'll take turns, or how do you help to?
I step back and let her do it because I understand that when she feeds my father, even if she's very tired, that she feels fulfilled, that in her mind, I'm a good wife. I took care of my husband. I'm showing him I love him. I'm caring for him. And as soon as she's done, then I would just step in and take over. Okay, mom, go lay down and I'll get him ready for bed and do all the other care. Like this past night, he had a really rough night. And so while she stayed up for most of the night, I finally had her go to bed. It's just been a rough time. So, I was up to about 5 or 6 with him just this morning. And then she got up and the first thing she said was, I'm going to feed him. Okay. So, yeah.
So it's goes back to what Kubi said about listening and about understanding where everyone's coming from. And while you're there to offer help, there's times when you just have to be that flexible person that you are to know when you can need to back up and know when you go forward. And that changes all the time. Yeah.
Robbie, I would just add one thing. I think we have to, it can be challenging at times. Having raised my children and helping to raise my grandson, those things don't prepare you for caring for your parent as you think it would. It's in truth a lot more challenging. Children kind of realize you're supposed to listen. With your parents, no, even though I just turned 60, I'm still my mom's daughter. So I think it's understanding that it's going to be a little bit more difficult, and that it is challenging for someone who's vibrant and full of life. And my mother used to make lei, and she did all kinds of things with her hands, and now she can't. Um, and recognizing that that's difficult for them, and to not for yourself imagine that your parent's still supposed to be as strong and vibrant, and that they're going to need help. And it can be difficult at times. So the one thing I would say is when you need to, give yourself a timeout. If you've got to step away for a little bit, go outside, take a deep breath, look at the ocean, look at the sky, the mountains, or whatever it takes for you, and just reconnect with yourself and your love for your loved one. And, then go back and do what you need to do. Because, the one thing we don't want to do is beat ourselves up. We're all trying our best, and sometimes certain days are not our best days. Not to beat ourselves up. And what everyone is saying is, look, it's okay to get help. You need to get help so you can be the best person your loved one needs. So I just say, feel free to get help. I just want to point people to the chat. I put a link, Kumi, to the NAMI site of the I Am Not Sick excerpt, so people could find it very easily. But ARP also has a Prepare to Care caregivers planning guide for you and your family, you pull that together. And there's, interestingly enough, Honolulu Magazine, by the way, if you didn't know, has a Kupuna resource guide. And I put a link in there of that. So again, I think look for resources, avail yourself of help. There's no shame. The shame is maybe just not thinking that you need help or that anyone else can do it for you. The truth is, a lot of people can help, and you ought to let them.
Very wise. I know one of the things, having been in that position as a caregiver too, sometimes it also helps to tell people who aren't able to see it, what would you do if it was your friend? If you were advising me, what would you say? Because then you put yourself in the other person's shoes. Because I think we all tend to be like, oh no, we can power through this. We can just stuff through everything else and get it done. So I think you folks have all given such good examples of, and Kaylee, your example of your grandson and how he relates in a different way. That is, there are those, as difficult as it can be, it also has those moments of sparkle. I don't know a better way to say it.
Absolutely. That's something when she passes, which of course he's dreading, he's going to be able to look back on and recognize that he did some really beautiful things with her. And we ought not keep other people from having that joy.
And thank you, Kaylee. You also posted the financial workbook. Vancil, you talked a little bit about that, about there are ways that people can help by getting a variety of things in order, like how your cousin group all got together to sort of pitched in to help. What are some of the other things that families can help each other with?
Yeah, I think some things that are really helpful, and some things that I work with families here at the clinic are, how do you begin to establish like the container of how this next phase looks? And that is really things like talking to a financial planner. Do you have access to bank statements, power of attorney, all of the sort of logistical things that our elders may have done freely and with their own mind. Those things sort of begin to fall off the way, and the next generation has to begin to pick up those pieces. So the more clarity there is around kind of the structure, it's actually going to help the family be able to transition, with the long-term care, with, whether the person wants to go to a care facility or stay at home. All of these things are really important and very difficult to talk about, but these are the conversations that we need to begin having. And I notice just kind of like hearing what everyone's talking about is we're dealing with adjustment, which is change, which means that we have lost something previously. And just within the last 15 months, we've lost so much, and we've all to varying degrees. And so we're dealing with like kind of a universal grief, and to be able to talk about that and to begin to share, kind of from our vulnerable places that we're all grieving some loss, right? And we're not alone in this. And there's ways that we can reorganize ourselves together to begin to lay out the next steps.
You folks have all had such varied experiences. I would like you to tackle a question about helping others communicate about difficult topics so that each generation can better understand each other. Please give us some examples, because I know you folks have all had good examples, and I think everyone listening will benefit from different things that you folks have learned about communicating about these difficult topics. Poki, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I think, when we're talking about this, I think first we should say that it always is coming from a good place, or most of the time. People are really trying to come from a very meaningful place. But sometimes to the person receiving it, can maybe miss the bar a little bit. And so when we were talking before, one of the examples I use is that a lot of people will come up to me and say things like, "You're so lucky your father is still here." And I know that they're trying to make me feel happy and better. And so I don't internalize it. I really look at it as an opportunity for some education awareness, not a lecture, but just to let them know that I so appreciate that you just said that to me. But it's not true. My father is in the end stage of Alzheimer's. I lost my father a long time ago and could do nothing but stand there and watch him fade away over the years. And as a healthcare person, you are taught to fix, to save, to cure. And there was nothing I could do, expected to have all the answers. And so while my father physically is here, and yes, of course, in there, he is still there, the person that he was always, and he'll always be my father. And that smile he gives me, and he still teaches me and guides me till this day. But there's no more conversations. I can't talk to him. My father isn't there to direct me and give me. And so while I totally understand it, sometimes it's more of it's a stab in the heart in some ways. And just very briefly, the other one that I get and people don't understand is, why can't you come, aunties and uncles, older people too, my friends, comments like, "Oh, well, I know you're so busy, so we didn't even invite you." Or we didn't, we figured, let us know when you're available. Well, as caregivers, we do become isolated, but please continue to invite us. We don't always know. And so I try to explain to my friends, because they have kids. Achilles said it's not exactly the same. And I tell them, please let me know. I will try to make it. But, I can't put my father in a car seat. He's 6 feet. There's no stroller for me to put him in, or to meet you guys at lunch and a changing table to take him to. He needs something every hour. So my time is very limited. But if I do know that something is happening, maybe I can make it. So it's just kind of being aware that we still want to have that connection with people.
Kumi, what's another good way of being able to communicate that can help? Because those are some really powerful examples of things where people for sure meant well, but they said the exact wrong thing. Maybe we could also talk a bit more about some of the examples of things that I think people feel compelled to try to come up with the perfect hallmark thing to say, that they want to come up with something original and helpful, and then realizing how daunting that is, just sort of say whatever. And then that's when you end up in that troubling space where they know that's not necessarily, I mean, they can tell by the reaction that that's not the right thing. What are some things that might be a little safer that might help us, any of you?
I would say that going back to that book, it does teach us questions we can ask to listen. And I know many of you know this, but and I have a hard time, but really just asking the question, what's going on? Wow, tell me more. Are you know, what is this all about? And just keep asking the questions to get them to come and explain what their struggles are. And then you can address it. And the other part I would say is I always talk from a place, I try to, I'm not perfect, but I try to talk from a place of my own personal experience and my own humility. And so then when my mother starts talking, oh yeah, I can't sleep and I can't sleep. And I said, yeah, mom, oh, I'm so sorry that you're struggling with that. I struggled with sleep issues too. That's why I went to my doctor and da da da. And so that's how the conversation starts. But I think when I can share that I struggled with depression, anxiety, I struggle with caregiver fatigue, I struggle with raising kids, whatever that might be, then the other people go, Kumi, I didn't know that. And then they start to spill and explain their struggles because they know that I've been there too.
Fonsil, is
Robbie,
that okay? Go
oh,
ahead.
no, I would just add one thing, Robbie, is, to ask people, just ask them, how are you doing? But be prepared to really listen. Somehow, we always, oh, how are you doing? And it's just a kind of frame of greeting. In that particular case, just how are you doing, and listening and hearing people out. But be ready yourself to actually listen and not share your own burdens and such, but just be willing to hear people out. And I'm sorry, Fonzie.
I think that's something you folks did talk about when we spoke earlier, is that the other thing is to, and you folks can say it more eloquently, but the idea of you don't have to compare. It's not a comparison. You don't need to bring anything. When you're asking someone about how it's going, then you're asking them about them, and it doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be about you and what's going on with you, and that's good. Francine, I think you had a good, you had some good thoughts on this that you could share about ways. I mean, obviously you're professional about getting people to talk about things.
I think just want to reiterate just kind of what everyone's saying. It's like we just have to meet people where they're at, right? And really come at it with curiosity and openness, and know that sometimes intent, we have great intentions, but sometimes the impact is different, right? And we just have to go, oh, I'm so sorry. Just really come at it with a real open humility, right? I'm just curious. I want to be here with you. What can I do? And not, some people, they don't want advice. They just want to be heard, because a lot of caregivers are isolated and they just want to be heard. So like, it's just deep empathetic listening. I think that is really helpful. I know my auntie here, she was caregiving not only my husband's grandmother, but her own father. And for many years, she's been a caregiver, professional caregiver for 20 years. And so whenever there's an opportunity, I invite her. I ask her, about what her day is like, and she still has she's still a person with life and vibrancy. She's just taken this other path for 10 to 20 years caregiving. And so she's still a human being. We still invite her. I know she can't always come, but I just want to honor that, right? And just like meet her exactly where she's at.
Let's go to some of the questions that we're already getting, because I see some good ones in here, and you folks can see them as well in the Q&A. In this first questioner, in general, my father and I get along very well. However, we disagree about the level of risk we're willing to take when it comes to going out or inviting people over. I'm more cautious. He's more open. I'm being cautious for his health because he's in his 80s, but he doesn't seem to appreciate that. How can I approach this conversation in a different way so we reach more of a consensus?
I actually think that's an excellent question, if you don't mind me jumping in, because this came up for our family. We were all trying to, in our generation, to be very protective, of course, of our elders. And some of our elders were saying, stop, right? They were saying, I want to live my life. I don't want to be home for 2 years. I don't know if these are my last 2 years. I just want to be with my family. I just want to enjoy my life. And we had to take a step back and go, wow, that's not how we were looking at it. That's not what we were trying to do. And so we had to really sit down and look at basic things like my risk tolerance comfort is a 1.5 or 2. Yours is like a 3 or a 4. Can we come together and compromise? But in the end, that still is their life and their choice to be able to choose where they want to be in terms of risk tolerance. And there was a lot of humbleness that happened in having that humility and having that conversation about what they wanted their life to look like. And they have the right to choose that, as long as we're able to choose that for ourselves as well. Yeah, I didn't think that would be my opinion on it after that conversation, because I went into it like, everyone's going to be safe. Here's your bubble, and no one's going anywhere. And they quickly, rightfully so, put me back into my proper place and said, my life, my decisions, and I want to have a quality of life, not a quantity of life. And so I said, you're right. That's a lesson well learned by me.
Can I jump into that? Happened exactly with my family. My father's an extrovert. He still works and travels, and he was meeting people left and right. And we said, Dad, we want to respect you. Yes, we want to respect you, but we are the full-time caregivers for Mom. And if you give her COVID, if you get her sick, it's going to affect the entire family and our entire dynamics. And then he decided, okay, I need to listen to my kids. So we told him, if you choose to go out and take risks, that's fine, but you will be quarantined from Mom. That's something we had to kind of lay down the law. But we gave him a choice, and he chose to abide by the rules, and it worked out all right. But yeah, it was a challenge.
Yeah, and it is difficult. I mean, back to what you said, Kaylee, and while you care for your kids and your kids listen to you to some degree of, we're all used to listening to our parents. So it can be difficult, and certainly keeping our sense of humor helped, and having those moments where you think of something that from the past that worked out. I know that was a help with my mom. My mom would loop on a couple of things that were difficult. One that was a happy occasion she would forget about. She'd forgotten that she'd gone to my wedding. So I printed out a picture and I would show it to her. And I knew, because she was so smart, she would blank on my husband's name, because she would be like, oh, where's that handsome man of yours? And so then I would use the prompt and that would work. And there were other times she blanked that someone in our family had passed away. And I kept repeating the same mistake until I realized neither of us needed to hear that again. And I stopped telling her that my sister had died, because it didn't seem to make any more sense to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to get through some of these, but like you said, Kelly, well, all of you, it's amazing to have the time to spend even when it's difficult. One of the things in the question, oh, go ahead.
No, I would just add to the question is,
yes.
What Comey did, I think, is a good example of what we also did with our mother, who wanted to be able to have her grandsons come and and go. And I think letting her know that if she were to get sick because of that, what that would mean for those who are caring for her. And I think we were able to compromise, yes, they can come, they've got to wear masks, do all the precautions, can't give Tutu a kiss, and all of that, but can sit down and talk story. And then she's got to wear a mask. So I think looking at where the middle ground is the best thing, because I think Von Seal said it, or maybe Mestiza, it wasn't the quantity of life so much as the quality.
Looking to another question that's come in from someone who's lost someone this year, and how that is dealing with the grief without the traditional celebration and the stress in the family. And, it is really difficult. And I know, Ms. Cece, you dealt with that directly, though, even though you were there with your dad, you were not able to have the type of getting together, the memorials where we used to be able to hug one another and eat and drink and talk story. Do you folks have thoughts on how we can, get through that, acknowledge it, how we can help each other?
We were still able to have a small memorial, but we also, and I think this is the great thing about like the silver lining of the experience, is that we had also this availability to have it online. So for the other elders in our family, they didn't have to come. They had that option to be able to watch from home, that we chose to do it over several days. And so that there were safe hours to come in, and that, there were a lot less children. It's just much smaller, much more thoughtful about safety and regulations. But personally having and still going through the grieving and healing process during this unique time, it disrupts this natural process that we go through, because how we heal is we connect back into life. We connect back with each other. We spend time with small children and the different members of our family, and start to be like, life continues, life goes on. I think it gets disruptive, and that's a normal thing to happen. And for myself, what I had to do is just to lean into it and say, this is what it is, and that this might take a little bit longer for me. I might need different things than I would have, like I did in the past, and that all those things are okay. And if I need to take self-care days, and I'm privileged to be able to have that option, I'm going to take those days. But also to say everyone grieves differently, and it's that, to me, is a unique experience to kind of keep in mind, because my siblings are in a different place than I am. My mother is in a different place than I am, and I can't judge or like be helpful to that process. I can just be loving in that process, because we're not going to match all the time. We're not going to match most of the time, but just to be able to say, I love you, I'm here for you, or I'm not okay, I'm going to need something a little bit more. And if I can't get it from them, then I'm going to look to my support system and find someone else that I can get it from. But I think, like Poki'i pointed out, not everyone has that. I'm very lucky to have a large family, to be very close to all of my cousins and my family members. And if you don't have that, and if you need that, there's some really great support groups out there. Please reach out. Please find those people with shared experience, who are in healthy places to help kind of guide you, validate how you feel, and help you make meaning as you move through that process. It's just so important to move through it and make a meaning out of it and heal through it. It doesn't go away. Platitudes don't help. Just say, I love you. I might not know what to say, but I'm here for you.
Thank you. I think that's a great message for everyone. I'm going to go to our last question that I think we're going to have time for. And that's from someone: my dad survived a stroke in 2019 that left him disabled. He's become very depressed, expressed suicide ideation, which got worse during the pandemic. He was born and raised in the Philippines. I was born and raised there. How can I connect with him as a caregiver? Can I ask one of you to tackle that? And then then we'll move on to our last quick questions, because that's a really good question. And Kaylee has also put a lot of resources in our chat that will help with that. But who wants to grab that one?
If folks don't mind, I'm not I'm not an expert in mental health by any means, but I think talking story and letting your father tell you about his life growing up asking him questions around what was it like to grow up in whatever, where they grew up in Cebu or wherever, and help him reconnect, I think, with some of those things. Again, I might be wrong, so please, if I'm giving really bad advice, somebody jump in. But being able to have him connect with you and share those stories, I think will help you feel much closer to him. If he had brothers and sisters, talk about his parents growing up, going to school, whatever the case may be. I mean, he probably has enough stories to keep you busy for quite a long time. And then the degree to which, if he is mobile and you're able to get out and go to a restaurant with
Those
some
are those
really
are
good
all a big
Filipino
help.
food or whatever else.
Yeah, for sure. Well, food is always the great bridge to everything, isn't it? At least for us, it is, I know. Well, thank you all for those answers and more resources in the chat. I'd like to ask all of you to think about that one thing that you'd like to leave our listeners with today. One piece of information or advice or something that you think is something you're going to feel good about when we leave today. You're just like, yes, I said that. Vancille, can I start with you? Is
Oh,
there
yeah,
one
sure. Yeah.
takeaway that you would like, or we're running a little.
I'm kind of lifting this from Brene Brown, but it's about choosing courage over comfort. Choosing what's right over, what's easy and safe and fast, right? It's practicing, showing up in every moment and really, wholeheartedly being brave and having these conversations and connecting and showing yourself like that. That's what I would have to say.
Poki'i, a good bottom line takeaway that you'd like to share?
I always go with things like smile, focus on what you can or what you can control, what you can still do, not what you can, but acknowledge those and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Kumi?
NAMI is about community and about hope. And so there is hope for you. If you're struggling like I did, we do have a community for you, free support groups, free classes. So check out namihawaii.org. There is hope.
I'm going to ask you to go next, Kali'i, and then Mestiza, but I'm also going to say that at NAMI, there's so many different ways you can get help there. You can look at things that you don't have to interact with someone and things that you do. So Kali'i, any quick takeaway?
I would just kind of reinforce what Vancille said, which is the way I look at it is to be comfortable with the discomfort and recognize that it's going to be difficult at times, and you've got to really stretch yourself and be comfortable with it, knowing that that's going to happen and that's natural. And again, be gentle on yourself. I think we expect so much more of ourselves than anyone else does. And then when we're incapable or unable to do it, we just beat ourselves up. And I think that's really the wrong way to go. And so be gentle on yourself, but more importantly, lots of resources out there. There really are more resources than you can imagine. Reach out and get some help.
Mestiza, bring us home with.
Yeah. Absolutely. I would say be authentic with other people so they hear your voice. They might then know what you need, and then be honest with yourself so that you can start to figure out what you might be needing and how much support you not need. And that combination is going to do us all well, because it really is okay to not be okay and to have challenging days. It's really okay that your best looks vastly different from day to day, and that your best could just be like getting up and getting through the day, whereas the next day is more productive. So yes, be authentic and then be honest, because that's going to help you get into that really great place of getting supported and getting the care that you need.
Thank you. Well, we'll have to leave it there because as we thought, we ran out of time because we had so many good things. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you to our sponsors, Kahala Clinic for Children and Family and Brain Health Hawaii, and HAIS, and our community sponsors, NAMI Hawaii and Mental Health America of Hawaii. We appreciate all of you. We encourage you to go to our website and find more information. You've seen all the tips that people have been sharing, and we're going to share more of them online. Just to be aware of the things that we can control and the ones that we can't control, and to keep connecting with others, and to remember we are in this together. So let's spread aloha. Thank you all for your help. There's more help that can be found on our website. We have a lot of resources here. You've seen them in the chat, and we'll put some more on our website. So please come back to our website at honolulumagazine.com. Thank you so much for joining us. Aloha.